What is going on, everybody? Bauer Brown here. Welcome back to the channel, guys, and welcome to another video. Well, I say another video, but we all know it's been a hot minute since since my last one. Anywho, the reason for this video is an update of sorts. I've been keeping in contact with many of you guys, either by email or just the comment section. And a lot of you guys have been asking, what's going on? And you have every right to. It's, what happened to me? Where did I go? What am I up to? What's going on with the channel? Those sorts of things. And they're all completely valid questions because I just sort of ghosted everybody. And why? What have I been up to? And like I said, I'm here to clear the air on a few things. Anyhow, I at least owe you guys that much, so you know what's going on and what you can expect from the channel moving forward. All right, so as far as what I've been up to, as you can see, we're looking now. I'm inside the editor, and it is the most current version of the editor, 10.0.10, so I've been keeping up with things. I've been following along, just like I always have. Maybe not as on top of things as I would have normally been, but I'm still dabbling in map making. Not as heavily as I used to, but when I can, I do. This here is a 4-kilometer version of Riverbend. It's missing more than it used to have. I mean, it used to have much more than this. It was much more fleshed out. I ran into an issue at some point, and I lost some work on it. And given my prior issues I've had with map making, that was kind of it. And that leads me to my second point. What had happened? And what happened is I had some of you guys might be familiar. I had a map called Palmer 2.0. If I can, I'll remind myself now while I edit to kind of throw that up on the screen here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But it's a map that I had nearly 2 years put into, give or take. And to make a long story short, I lost the map. And not lost it like is in my couch cushion or, fell down the crack in a seat in my car. The data became corrupted and the map was gone. Right now, I won't get into the reasons it got corrupted, but ultimately that is what happened. Now, I still do have a majority of the map. I still have, the majority of my prefabs and a lot of the things that made the map work. So I can remake the map. I can. It wouldn't be, it's still a lot of work. It's a lot less work than if I had to do, if I had to start it from scratch. But it's still a ton of work after 2 years, and it was heartbreaking to see it go. And I had just had some other issues, with things. I was burned out, completely burned out up to that point. I had some trolls that I was tired of dealing with, and, trust me, a couple people can ruin it for an entire community. And none of you guys, as far as I know, have had any type of those issues with me. But, some guys just, I guess can't bite their tongue. And it's just, I don't know, the way they were raised, I guess. And you can always tell. And you know who you are. If you're listening, you know who you are. But I've learned to really not give a crap either way anymore. It is what it is. Like I said, a couple of people can ruin it for the whole community. And it's not my loss. I'm still good to go. Anyhow, so that's kind of what happened, burned out. I got fed up once I lost my map. I didn't have the desire to start all over, to keep moving forward. I had been not neglecting other areas of my life, but kind of, I'm a busy guy to begin with. I'm a single dad, I work full time. And so that in itself is enough to keep me plenty busy, and it does. So making time for map making and videos and stuff like that isn't always easy. And it never was. Probably never will be. But like I said, losing the map, and it was mostly a backup issue. I'm very vigilant about backing up my maps, and I was keeping backups at that time. I'll tell you the whole story another time if you're interested. But that's what it was. It was a backup issue, basically. So like I said, I did start some things over again. The Riverbend map being one of them. And again, I ran into another issue, and once I hit that issue a second time around, that was it. I wasn't even going to tolerate it this time. Enough is enough. I'm an avid flight simmer. I love aviation. I'm an aviation enthusiast. So just to kind of even stress that point, Microsoft Flight Simulator came out like a week or two after Farming Simulator 25. Here is my Steam page with Flight Simulator 2024 with 979.3 hours and Farming Simulator with 23.5. So you can kind of see where my time is being spent, or free time anyhow. And it seems like lately I have none of that. I just don't have any free time, and it's kind of is what it is. But I do miss map making. I do, I miss doing video tutorials. There's a lot of things I miss about it, and I would like to get back into it if and when I can find the time to do so. So that's what happened, and that's where I've been. Like I said, when I could, either flying airplanes or developing scenery, hangars, airports, that type of thing, and it's just as much fun. I have just as much fun, landing at an airport I developed myself, or parking my airplane in a hangar that I developed, than I do parking my tractor in a field that I developed, or a barn that I developed. You get the idea. So it's not that there's any love lost with FS25. It was time to step away for a while, but I don't want it to remain that way permanently. I do not. So like I said, I at least figured I owed it to you guys, at least that much. Where have I been? What have I been up to? And so, contrary to not popular belief, but I'll dispel any rumors. And, obviously I'm not deceased. I'm not in a hospital, not in jail. I'm very much here. Just kind of living life. Now, as far as the future of the channel, I don't know. You tell me. What are your thoughts? And I know plenty of you guys, I've got enough feedback to know that there's been quite a few people out there that have gotten a lot from the channel. I've even seen your work progress. I've seen a lot of you guys are very talented, and you didn't start out that way. None of us did, and it's good. Everybody needs a resource they can fall back on, to help keep moving them forward with, whatever it is they're doing. In this case, map making. When I started, that was the reason this channel even got started. Because when I got started with map making, there was next to no resources available. I mean, there was a few, but definitely not enough. Everything I had to learn the hard way on my own. I mean, not everything, but most things. All right. So, and the resources that were available, not all of them were the greatest. Even to date, that's still the case. It's just sometimes you're even better off without. And I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. I applaud the effort, for pretty much anybody that, wants to help the community grow as a whole. And I'll just say that some channels or some resources are better than others. Let's just put it that way. Right. But like I said, not knocking anybody's hard work, and I know how much work goes into these things. So it is what it is. But, I'd like to know what everybody else has been up to. Are you still working on projects? Does anybody have maps going on, or are we working on 2 kilometer, 4 kilometer? How are you making out with the resources that are available? Is there enough resources out there for you guys? Because I know there's a lot of new channels out there as far as, tutorials and stuff like that. Are you learning everything you need to learn? Is there anything you want to learn that's not being covered out there? Those type of things. A couple things that I thought about was, one, Palmer 2.0. It was originally developed for FS22, but I'm really thinking about giving it another shot. I've never been one to completely walk away. I might get frustrated and turn my back for a little bit, take a breather, which is what I did this time, but I've never been one to give up, ever. And with all the work that I had into Palmer 2.0, I just can't let it go. I recreated an entire town, for Christ's sakes. I developed all the models, like every single house in that town I remodeled. All the diners, the fire station, street signs, just random buildings. I mean, there is a ton. So I'd really like to keep moving forward with that. And this time it will be in FS25, which I think was pretty cool, because FS25 looks great. They've really come a long way with the whole Farming Simulator series. since I've gotten into it. So I would like to recreate it for FS25 and, create a video series around it, whether it's, tutorial related or just whatever, just mapping related. Any other thing, like as you can see here, is the expansion on your base game maps. It's one thing I should probably think it's about time to do a video series on that. It's something I had planned for way back in FS22 and just never got to. I think a lot of these guys are definitely talented enough that, I think we could see some really good expansion maps out there, and I don't know why we haven't seen more. I think maybe people have some issues. I've seen a couple, some of them not so much expansions. They just kind of redid what was already there. They made it bigger, but not really an expansion. They changed a base game map. And to me, if you change the base game map, that's not really an expansion. It's an alteration. But either way, maybe you're having a hard time figuring that out. The process, it's not too complicated. Once I show you, you'll be like, Jesus, that was a lot easier than I thought it would be. But it takes a little bit of thinking outside the box. Anyhow, so I'd like to do a video series on that. Show you guys how to, turn a 2-kilometer map into a 4-kilometer map or bigger. I generally don't tend to go any bigger than 4-kilometer, but I have dabbled. I've done 3-kilometer and I've done 5.5 kilometers. I think a 6-kilometer I had going at one point. The bigger it gets, the more work that needs to go into it. And I'm very detail oriented. Detail will make or break a map. Lack of detail, it just leaves a boring map. It's a lot of work that went into it, but it's still boring. That's what transports you into the map. It makes you feel like you're there and gives you that real experience, is the detail. And so, a lot of my stuff is done by hand. Now I've still been doing, procedural placement. I've been working with scripts and procedural placement and stuff like that when it fits, when it's right. But I still do a lot of work by hand. I'm a very artsy person, so I like to do a lot of these things by hand. And it's just a ton of work in the end. So the bigger your map gets, more work that goes into it, obviously. So, like I said, I'd like to hear from you guys. What have you been up to? What would you like to see from the channel? I'm sure, not most of these guys, all of these guys ended up on this channel because, for mapping related reasons. So I'd sure hate to have you guys come back to the channel one day and it's flight simulator material, or maybe just a mix of things. I thought about that, because I never want to turn my back on farming simulator altogether, but do I want to start doing other things, showing you modeling for flight simulator or getting into not so much let's play, but yeah, I guess, stuff like that, gameplay videos. I just don't know, I'd like your opinion now. See what you guys think, what would you like to see from the channel? What have you been up to? All that stuff. So anyhow, that is my update. I don't want to ramble on too long. I know I've always had a habit of doing that, and I guess this is no different. So that is my update to you. I'm not sure when the next video is going to be or what it's going to be about. Hopefully not too long. That remains to be seen. But in the meantime, I'd love to hear from you guys. So, throw a comment down below. Let me know what you've been up to. And with that being said, Bauer Brown, and I'll see you on the next one.